quietly, behind the scenes, Google might have just made one of its most important AI moves so far. And most people have no idea what actually changed. On paper, it sounds boring. There's a new flagship model called Gemini 3 Pro, a thing called Generative UI, and something called Gemini Agent that can act on your behalf inside Google's ecosystem. But if you stop there, it just feels like another version of Gemini. When you actually look at how these pieces all fit together, this starts to look less like Gemini but faster, and more like the beginning of a completely different way we're going to use computers. Instead of hunting down the right app, the right calculator, the right form, you can simply describe what you want and Gemini builds the interface for you, and then an agent quietly does a lot of the steps in the background. That's a big shift. So let's break down what Gemini 3 Pro actually is, what generative UI really does in practice, and how Gemini agents work, and what all of this could mean for how you work, learn, and build things over the next few years. So first, the foundation. Gemini 3 Pro. Google didn't start this generation by shipping a small demo model. They went straight to the top and launched the Pro version first. This is the model they're positioning as state-of-the-art in reasoning, and one that's supposed to handle the hard stuff. Multi-step logic, dense analysis, coding, math, complex planning. The idea isn't just more facts. It's better thinking. When you write a prompt, you don't want to spell out every tiny instruction like you're teaching a robot how to walk. Gemini 3 Pro is tuned to read a bit deeper into what you meant, not just what you literally typed. Ask it to help you plan a project, and it's not just regurgitating generic advice. It's supposed to recognize that there are dependencies, trade-offs, missing information, and help you structure those things. There's also a tonal shift. A lot of AIs today are trained to be overly flattering and verbose. They repeat your questions back to you, thank you for asking, and wrap up everything in disclaimers. It can feel nice once or twice, but when you're actually trying to get work done, it wastes time. Gemini 3 Pro is intentionally tuned to be more direct and concise. Less of, what a great question, and more, here's the point, here's the reasoning, and here's what you should consider next. So that's the core. A smarter, less fluffy brain. On its own, that's useful. But the really interesting part is what Google is building around the brain. That brings us to generative UI. For years, almost every AI interaction has looked the same. You have a box, you type something, and you get back text. Maybe there's an input or a chart, but it's still just output in a feed. Generative UI asks a different question. What if the AI didn't just give you content, but also assembled the interface you need on the fly? Imagine you're looking at a potential home purchase. Instead of Googling mortgage calculator, clicking around, entering numbers, going back and forth, you tell Gemini something like, I'm considering a $550,000 house with 20% down. Build me something where I can slide the interest rate between 5 and 8% and see how my monthly payment and total interest change. A standard chatbot would respond with paragraphs and maybe a little table. With generative UI, Gemini can actually create a small interactive calculator right there with sliders, input fields, outputs, and updates as you drag. You're not just searching for a tool. The tool is being generated for you. All right, now the shift example. Take a concept like black holes. For a 5-year-old, the ideal experience might be a simple animated scene with a star collapsing and a spaceship getting stretched. But for a college student, maybe it's a panel with equations and a visual of how space-time bends. Generative UI lets Gemini tailor not just the text, but the whole experience. One person gets a little interactive story, another gets a tiny lab with graphs and formulas that they can poke at. Same underlying model, entirely different mini map, built on demand. Once you see that, you realize how many small utilities we currently outsource to random websites and simple apps. We use tip calculators, converters, basic budgeting tools, quick quiz generators, All of these are just light interfaces wrapped around a logic. Generative UI is essentially saying a lot of those can be created instantly when you describe what you need. That doesn't kill every specialized app, but it absolutely puts pressure on the simplest ones. If AI can build an adequate version of your tool in seconds, it has to be asked, why would somebody install a dedicated app for it? So Generative UI turns Gemini from a clever text box into something more like a pop-up workshop. It builds the little tools around your problem instead of forcing you to adapt to a pre-built interface. The next step is bolder, letting it leave that workshop and actually doing things for you. That's where Gemini Agent comes in. An agent in the context is an AI that doesn't just answer questions, but it takes actions. It can navigate websites, fill out forms, interact with services, and chain steps together to reach a goal. What makes Gemini Agent interesting is where it's allowed to operate. It's not just out there roaming the internet. Google is wiring it straight into its own services. Gmail, Calendar, and other Gemini tools. So instead of saying, summarize my last 10 emails, you can say something like, go through my inbox for the last week. Group anything that looks like a newsletter and give me one short summary of what I missed. Pull out any messages that clearly need a reply. Draft responses that sound like me, and match proposed meeting times against my calendar. Don't send anything yet. I'll approve it first. In the background, the agent is reading your messages through Gmail, checking your availability in Calendar, and drafting replies and organizing everything for you. You're not manually opening, sorting, and responding to each message. You're reviewing the work your AI assistant already did. Or take trip planning. Instead of digging up confirmation emails, copying dates, checking timing, and opening separate tabs for rental cars and hotels, you might say, find my upcoming flight details and add the schedule to my calendar. Then prepare 3 reasonable hotel and car options based on those dates and my usual preferences. I want a short list I can pick from. You still make the final decision. Gemini Agent doesn't secretly book things behind your back. It's built so that significant actions require your explicit confirmation, so you stay in control the whole entire time. But the repetitive mechanical part of the process, searching, cross-checking, sorting, can be overloaded. When you combine that with a model like Gemini 3 Pro, the ability to build custom interfaces with generative UI, you get a picture of where this is headed. You describe outcomes, the AI assembles tools, takes the first passes at work, and brings you something to review instead of a blank screen. Right now, though, there's a catch. Gemini Agent isn't something Google is just handing out to everyone. At launch, it sits behind a plan called Google AI Ultra that costs around $250 a month. That immediately tells you 2 things. First, this is aimed squarely at serious users and organizations, not casual experimentation. And second, Google is being cautious. They want this in the hands of people who have real reason to use it and who can live with early quirks and limitations. For most individuals, the price is going to be more than enough to stay away from it for now. But just because you won't pay for it today doesn't mean you shouldn't ignore it. High-end features like this have a habit of quietly working their way down into cheaper products once they've tested and refined. The point of watching Gemini 3, Generative UI, and Gemini Agent now isn't to run out and subscribe. It's to understand the shape of where AI is going, so that when more accessible versions arrive, you're not starting from zero. So here's the practical takeaway. As these tools evolve, the biggest gains will go to the people who are already thinking in terms of outcomes and systems. The people who know which parts of their day are just repetitive, moving information around, formatting, sorting, and which parts actually require their judgment and creativity. If you start paying attention now to where you waste time, where you repeat the same pattern of clicks and keystrokes, you'll be ready to hand those off the moment agents like this become widely available. Because the real shift isn't AI gets smarter, it's you stop being the person who manually pushes every button. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to stay informed on where tools like Gemini are actually going, not just the hype headlines, Take a second right now to hit the like button and subscribe. I'm going to keep covering these kind of updates in plain English with a focus on what they mean for your actual life, your work, and your future. So if you don't want to wake up 2 years from now and realize everyone else has been quietly using this stuff while you've been ignoring it, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.